What if I told you that cutting your masturbation down to just 10 times a month could completely rewire your brain, reignite your energy, and even bring back the kind of desire and clarity you thought were gone for good? This isn't about shame. It's not about quitting. It's about control. I'm Dr. James, a men's health specialist with over 30 years of experience helping older men rebuild their vitality, one honest conversation at a time. And today I want to talk to you about a number: 10. 10 times or less a month. It might sound random, even restrictive, but what if that number held the secret to restoring your dopamine sensitivity, calming your mind, and reconnecting you to real intimacy, not just habit? In this video, I'll walk you through what actually happens to your mind, your emotions, and your body when you drop below that threshold. We'll explore what the science says, what real men are experiencing, and how it could shift the way you age, not just sexually, but emotionally and mentally. And make sure you stay with me, because a little later, I'll give you one simple question to ask yourself after every session that could change everything. Before we dive in, if you haven't subscribed yet, I encourage you to do that now and turn on the bell so you never miss another honest, science-backed health message made specifically for men over 60. And if this topic speaks to you, type 1 in the comments. If not, type 0. Your feedback helps me create content that truly supports your journey. Now let's begin with the first and perhaps most surprising change that happens when you cut back to 10 times or less a month. Your brain starts to reset. Specifically, your dopamine system, the one responsible for motivation, excitement, and joy, begins to come back online. And for many older men, this simple shift can reignite the spark they've quietly felt slipping away for years. 1. You may regain dopamine sensitivity. When men in their 60s come into my office and quietly admit they feel numb to joy, I listen closely. They'll say things like, "Nothing excites me anymore, doc, not food, not hobbies, not even sex." And I know what's really going on beneath the surface. For many of them, it's not depression or aging, it's dopamine desensitization. Dopamine is the brain's reward chemical. It's what gives you the sense of pleasure, excitement, motivation, and emotional satisfaction. Every time you masturbate, especially if it involves intense or fast stimulation or the use of pornography, your brain floods with dopamine. That's not necessarily bad. It's part of how our biology is wired. But when you overstimulate too often, your brain stops responding. It takes more to feel less. That's how pleasure slowly becomes routine, and routine becomes emptiness. This is something I've seen in countless men over 60. They don't even realize how overstimulated their reward system has become until they take a break. When they intentionally reduce their frequency to 10 times or less each month, something remarkable starts to happen. Their brain begins to reset. Pleasure returns in places they hadn't noticed in years. A simple walk outdoors feels refreshing. A hug from their partner feels deeper. Even music stirs something again. And slowly, the fog starts to lift. There's solid science behind this. A 2021 study published in Frontiers in Psychiatry found that reducing sexual overstimulation may help restore reward sensitivity, particularly in individuals struggling with compulsive sexual behavior. This isn't just about habits. It's about how your brain rebuilds the ability to experience pleasure from real-life, meaningful moments, not just artificial or instant gratification. One of my patients, Robert, 66, told me something that stuck with me. He said, "I thought I was losing interest in life. Turns out I was just overstimulating the wrong parts of my brain." That insight changed the way he approached not only his sexual habits, but his relationships, his health, and his sense of purpose. When you step back, just a little. Your brain steps forward. It begins to rediscover what it means to feel again, not just sexually, but emotionally. That's the power of reconnecting with your dopamine system. But here's the fascinating part. It's not just your brain that begins to feel more alive. Something else changes too. Something deeper, almost invisible, but every bit as real. It's what we call sexual exhaustion, and what happens when you unknowingly push your body too far for too long. Let's explore that next. 2. You might reduce symptoms of sexual exhaustion. I'll never forget the look on Walter's face. He was 69, sat down in my office and said, "Doc, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm not depressed, but I feel empty. I'm tired all the time, even when I sleep well. I don't feel like myself." He paused and added, almost in a whisper, "It usually happens after I touch myself. I just shut down." What Walter described is far more common than most men realize. It's something we call sexual exhaustion, and it doesn't just show up in the body. It shows up in your energy, your emotions, and your ability to feel connected to the world around you. It's the kind of fatigue that doesn't go away with a nap. It lingers, quiet, heavy, subtle, and most men, especially older men, never talk about it. Sexual exhaustion often follows a pattern of high-frequency masturbation, especially when it's used to numb feelings of boredom, loneliness, stress, or emotional discomfort. While research on this subject is still growing, one survey published in the Journal of Behavioral Addictions found that men who engaged in compulsive or high-frequency sexual behavior reported emotional burnout, mental fog, and reduced social engagement. In other words, they weren't just physically tired, they felt disconnected from life. When older men reduce their sexual frequency to around 10 times or fewer each month, that crash starts to soften. They report feeling more stable, more focused, and less anxious. They wake up with more clarity and find they're not as reactive throughout the day. Little frustrations don't hit as hard. Conversations feel easier. They stop needing that rush to feel okay. And that shift, I'll tell you, is liberating. I remember one man telling me it felt like I was running a race every day, but going nowhere. When I slowed down, my legs finally stopped burning. That's what sexual exhaustion does. It wears you out slowly without you ever realizing it. But once you step back, you start to rebuild your reserves. You regain the ability to be present with your thoughts, with others, and with yourself. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Once the fog lifts, something else often returns. Something many men haven't felt in years: emotional balance. They stop chasing stimulation and start reconnecting with calm. And in that calm, a powerful transformation begins. One that reshapes not just their feelings, but their focus, their concentration, and their sense of emotional control. Let's talk about that next. 3. Improved focus and emotional regulation. Not long ago, I had a patient named Leonard, 72, sharp-witted, the kind of man who reads 3 newspapers a day and still plays chess with his grandson. But lately, he told me something felt off. He couldn't concentrate the way he used to. Simple tasks took longer. His emotions felt unpredictable. He'd find himself irritated, even anxious for no reason at all. "I'm not sad, I'm just scattered," he said, "like my brain won't stay in one place." It didn't take long for us to uncover a pattern. Like many men his age, Leonard had fallen into a quiet habit, masturbating once a day, usually in the evenings, not out of desire, but out of boredom. It was automatic, like brushing his teeth. He'd never thought much of it. But when we gently explored what might happen if he slowed down, something started to change. When Leonard reduced his frequency to under 10 times a month, the difference was subtle at first, but powerful over time. He reported feeling more focused in the morning, more emotionally even throughout the day, and less dependent on quick pleasure to escape an uncomfortable moment. It was as if his brain had been trying to reboot and finally found space to breathe. There's science to support what Leonard felt. A 2020 study by Imhoff and Zimmer found that men who practiced self-regulation around sexual behaviors, meaning they didn't give in to every impulse, scored higher in emotional clarity and mental focus. They were better at handling stress. They didn't spiral as often. And their ability to stay calm, grounded, and present was significantly stronger. It's not that masturbation itself dulls the mind, it's the pattern, when it becomes your go-to response for any emotional discomfort. And over time, the brain starts to associate stress with escape. But when you reduce the frequency, your brain has room to relearn something healthier, that it can sit with feelings, ride them out, and still be okay. Leonard told me, "It's like my brain finally caught up to the rest of me. I feel more like myself again." And that's the magic of emotional regulation. Not being perfect, but being steady, being clear. But here's where it gets even more encouraging. Once you regain that emotional steadiness, you don't lose touch with your sexuality. In fact, quite the opposite happens. You begin to stay sexually engaged, but without being pulled by impulse. You become the one in control, and that changes everything. Let's look at why that balance might be the healthiest place to live. 4. You stay sexually engaged without losing control. One of the biggest fears older men share with me when we talk about cutting back is this: if I stop doing it as often, will I lose my sex drive completely? It's a fair question. For so long, we've been taught that staying active means staying alive, especially in the bedroom. But here's the truth I've come to learn, both from the research and from working with hundreds of men over 60. You don't lose your sex drive by slowing down, you reclaim it. There's a very real difference between staying sexually engaged and being driven by habit or compulsion. Many older men think daily release keeps them in shape, but over time that constant stimulation becomes less about desire and more about routine. It's no longer an experience, it's a checkbox. But when you reduce frequency to 10 times or less a month, something shifts. You start to feel the spark again, not just physically, but emotionally. Your desire becomes intentional, not automatic. And that subtle change brings back a kind of connection you may not have felt in years. You're not cutting off your sexuality. You're giving it breathing room. Sexual health, especially after 60, isn't just about function. It's about blood flow, confidence, connection, and self-awareness. And all of that can still thrive without overuse. In fact, studies show that moderate sexual activity, including masturbation, helps support prostate health, regulate hormones, and maintain emotional balance. For many men, this moderate rhythm becomes the sweet spot, just enough to stay engaged without feeling drained or dependent. One man I worked with, Peter, age 70, put it perfectly. He said, "I stopped chasing the release and started enjoying the buildup again. I didn't lose my sexuality. I found it again." That's what this is really about. It's not about quitting. It's about quality over quantity, presence over pattern, reconnection over repetition. And for women, by the way, the same principle applies. Moderate self-pleasure improves circulation, supports hormonal balance, and strengthens pelvic muscles, especially during and after menopause. It's not a male or female issue, it's a human one. But there's another layer to this conversation that many men overlook. It's not just about staying sexually active. It's about understanding how your habits might be quietly influencing something much bigger: your long-term prostate health. And what you're about to learn there might just surprise you. Let's go deeper. 5. Masturbation and physical health, especially for men. I remember a conversation with Daniel, a 73-year-old retired teacher. He leaned forward, voice lowered, and asked, "Doc, if I stop doing it so much, am I hurting my health?" He'd read somewhere that frequent ejaculation could protect the prostate, and now he was afraid that cutting back might do more harm than good. It's a common concern, and like many things in health, the truth isn't black and white, it's nuanced. There was a well-known study from Harvard published in European Urology that found men who ejaculated at least 21 times per month had a lower risk of developing prostate cancer than those who did it less frequently. Naturally, that made a lot of men feel like they had to keep up with that number as if their health depended on it. But what most people miss is the context. That study was focused on middle-aged men, not seniors. It was also based on self-reported data, which can be unreliable. And perhaps most importantly, it didn't explore the emotional, mental, or behavioral consequences of high-frequency masturbation, especially in older men. For men over 60, the equation changes. Your prostate is aging, your nervous system is more sensitive, and your sexual rhythm may no longer match the demands of your younger years. What I often see in my practice is this. Men who reduce their frequency to 10 times or fewer a month often feel more balanced, mentally, emotionally, and physically, without any decline in their prostate health. In fact, many of them notice improved urinary flow, less pelvic tension, and more satisfying erections, not necessarily because of the lower frequency itself, but because they're more in tune with their bodies. When you're not chasing a daily release, you start listening to what your body truly needs. Of course, regular ejaculation still has benefits. It supports circulation in the pelvic region and helps prevent stagnation. But that doesn't mean more is always better. It means the act should be done with awareness, not obligation. Daniel told me, "I used to feel like I was doing it for maintenance. Now I do it because I actually want to." That shift makes all the difference. But there's another important layer here, especially for men dealing with chronic issues like prostatitis or pelvic pain. And what the science says about frequency in those cases might surprise you. So if you're managing a condition or wondering what's best for your individual body, you won't want to miss what comes next. 6. Very low ejaculation frequency might not be ideal for long-term prostate health. A few months ago, I had a follow-up appointment with Carl, a 67-year-old widower who had started cutting back his masturbation after watching one of my earlier videos. At first, he felt great, more energy, better focus, and less emotional heaviness. But over time, he began noticing something strange. His pelvic area felt tighter, urination became slightly more difficult, and his erections felt less responsive. He looked at me and asked, "Doc, is it possible I went too far in the other direction?" The answer, surprisingly, is yes. While cutting back can offer many benefits, going too low, especially for older men, may carry some hidden risks. Your sexual system isn't designed to be completely dormant. Just like any other part of the body, your prostate and pelvic floor need gentle stimulation and movement to stay healthy. That doesn't mean you need to chase high numbers, but it does mean that complete or extreme reduction isn't always the healthiest option either. That same study from European Urology that suggested 21 ejaculations a month could lower prostate cancer risk wasn't prescribing a magic number. It was pointing to a pattern. Men who remain sexually active within reason tend to have better long-term outcomes. The science isn't perfect and it doesn't apply equally to all ages, but the idea is sound. Motion matters. Flow matters. And when you shut things down too tightly, you may create other problems, like congestion, inflammation, or decreased tissue elasticity. For men with certain health conditions, such as chronic pelvic pain, enlarged prostate, or even mild erectile dysfunction, gentle, regular ejaculation can support blood flow, ease muscle tension, and reduce inflammation. In these cases, reducing too much might actually make symptoms worse, not better. That's why I always say, there's no one-size-fits-all number. 10 times a month may be perfect for one man and not enough for another. The key is paying attention. If your body is signaling discomfort, don't ignore it. Self-awareness is a powerful tool, especially as you age. Carl and I worked together to find his middle ground. He didn't go back to old habits, but he added a few mindful sessions each week. Within a month, his symptoms began to ease and his confidence returned. But this conversation isn't just about men. There's another half to this story, women. And the way their bodies respond to moderate self-pleasure is not only fascinating but deeply important for their health and emotional well-being. Let's talk about that next. 7. Masturbation. Benefits for women too. I once had a couple, both in their 70s, who came to see me not for a medical issue, but for something deeper. They had lost their connection. They still loved each other, but their physical intimacy had faded. She, in particular, felt emotionally flat and disconnected from her body. "I just don't feel like a woman anymore," she whispered. It broke my heart. But what followed surprised even them. We didn't begin with couples therapy. We began with her relationship to herself. Many people forget that masturbation isn't just about sexual release. It's about reconnection, especially for women in their later years. As the body changes through menopause and beyond, hormonal shifts can lead to vaginal dryness, pelvic muscle weakening, and reduced libido. But studies and clinical experience both show that gentle, regular self-pleasure can play a powerful role in reversing those effects. Dr. Lauren Streicher, one of the most respected voices in women's health, has emphasized that mindful masturbation improves blood circulation to the pelvic region, reduces menstrual or postmenopausal discomfort, and even strengthens the pelvic floor muscles, which support bladder control and core stability. For women experiencing vaginal dryness or painful intercourse, self-pleasure can become a way to restore comfort, elasticity, and confidence without medication. More than that, there's a psychological layer. Regular self-touch helps many women maintain a sense of ownership over their bodies, especially in a world that often tells them their sexuality has an expiration date. When women engage with their bodies in a conscious, loving way, even just a few times a month, it often leads to greater body acceptance, better sleep, reduced stress, and a rekindled sense of emotional intimacy with their partners. The woman from that couple, after a few weeks of focusing on her own pleasure, privately on her own terms, she returned to my office glowing. "It's not just about sex," she said. "It's about feeling like I belong in my body again." That change transformed her relationship not only with her husband, but with herself. So whether you're a man or a woman, the message is clear. This isn't about stopping. It's about finding your rhythm, your way to stay connected without draining your emotional or physical energy. But that leads us to an even deeper question, one I ask every patient. Is it really about how often you do it? Or why you do it in the first place? And when you start asking that, everything begins to shift. Let's dig into that now. 8. If you're cutting back, it's worth checking in with your body. A few years ago, I had a patient named Sharon, 65, widowed, thoughtful, and full of questions about aging well. She told me, "Dr. James, I've started cutting back on sex and self-pleasure. I thought it would help me feel more disciplined, more in control, but now I'm not so sure. Some days I feel stronger, other days I feel off. How do I know what's right for me? That question stuck with me. Because the truth is, there is no one-size-fits-all number. Whether you're a man or a woman, 10 times a month isn't a magical benchmark. It's a starting point for reflection. What really matters is not just how often you masturbate, but how and why you do it. There are times when less truly is more. When slowing down allows your brain and body to reset, your emotions to rebalance, your energy to rebuild. But there are also times when less becomes too little, when you begin to feel disconnected from your own sensuality or from your body's basic needs. Especially in older age, when circulation, hormone balance, and emotional processing work a little differently, your body is constantly trying to tell you what it needs. The key is learning to listen. Sometimes you might go days without the urge, and that's perfectly normal. Other times you may feel a stronger need, not from boredom or habit, but from a genuine desire to reconnect, to feel grounded, or even to process grief or tension. The important thing is not to shame yourself in either direction. This is a season of life where compassion and awareness must guide the way. I tell my patients, you don't have to be rigid, you have to be honest. Ask yourself, is this helping me feel more alive, more connected, more calm? If the answer is yes, then you're probably in the right rhythm. If the answer is no, it might be time to adjust, not based on guilt or comparison, but based on truth. When Sharon tuned in and allowed herself to respond to her body with gentleness, some weeks a little more, some a little less, her entire mood shifted. She felt more at peace, more confident, and more emotionally steady. But there's one factor that changes everything, something even deeper than rhythm or frequency. It's your intent. And when your intent is rooted in mindfulness instead of avoidance, the benefits of self-pleasure expand far beyond the physical. Let's talk about that next. 9. The number alone. 10 or less isn't the whole story. One afternoon, I was speaking with George, a 70-year-old retired firefighter. He had decided to limit his masturbation to no more than 10 times a month after reading about its mental and physical benefits. At first, he felt proud of the discipline, but over time, something started to feel off. I'm hitting the number, he told me, but something still feels wrong, like I'm not getting what I hoped for out of it. I asked him to walk me through his routine, and that's when it became clear. Every time George did masturbate, it was rushed. He was alone, in the dark, watching the same old videos, not really feeling anything, just going through the motions. And when it was over, he'd feel a little more disconnected, a little more empty. The truth is, the number 10 or fewer times a month isn't the full picture. What really matters is how you're showing up in the experience. Are you present? Are you in your body? Or are you using the moment as a way to avoid something? Loneliness, boredom, sadness, anxiety? Experts like Dr. Alexandra Katahakis, a leader in the field of sexual health and trauma recovery, have long emphasized the importance of intentionality. Mindful masturbation, without guilt, without distraction, without overstimulation, can be healing. But when it's fueled by avoidance or emotional suppression, even just a few times a month can leave you feeling more drained than fulfilled. I often tell my patients that masturbation isn't about keeping score. It's about reconnecting. It's not about abstaining or indulging. It's about aligning. When you bring presence to the experience, it becomes nourishing. When you check out, it becomes depleting. George started shifting his approach. He stopped relying on porn. He slowed down. He made it a time to breathe, to feel, to reconnect, not just with sensation, but with himself. Within a few weeks, he told me, "I finally get it now. It wasn't the frequency. It was my intention that needed adjusting." And this brings us to the most important insight of all. When you learn how to tune in, when you know the difference between escaping and engaging, you gain something that no number can measure: control. And it all comes down to a simple, powerful question I ask every man to reflect on after each session. I'll share it with you next. 10. You may notice more motivation, less brain fog, and a clearer sense of control over your impulses. One of the most rewarding parts of my job is seeing men return to themselves, mentally, emotionally, and physically. That moment when they realize they're no longer just reacting to urges, but responding to life with clarity. That's real strength, and it often begins with a very simple shift: choosing to be intentional about when and why they touch themselves. I had a longtime patient named Harold, 74, a former mechanic who prided himself on being in control of everything. But when it came to his sexual habits, he quietly admitted they had become automatic. "It's like I hit play on a loop I can't stop," he told me. "And afterward, I just feel off." So I gave him a simple challenge. I didn't ask him to quit. I just asked him to stay under 10 times a month, and here's the key: to ask himself one question after every session. Do I feel more alive or more empty? That one question changed everything. He started noticing the difference between a moment of connection and a moment of escape. When he felt more alive afterward, he knew he'd done it from a place of presence and self-respect. When he felt empty, he began to pause, reflect, and redirect. Over time, the results were undeniable. His focus improved, his energy came back, he was less reactive, more motivated, and more emotionally centered. He even picked up painting again, a hobby he hadn't touched in decades. And Harold wasn't alone. Men in their 60s and 70s often report that when they reduce their frequency and bring more awareness to their habits, their lives begin to feel lighter. Less mental fog, less guilt, fewer mood swings, more peace, and above all, a quiet confidence that replaces the shame or confusion that may have lived in the background for years. You see, this isn't just about sex. It's about self-leadership. It's about taking control of the small, private parts of your life and realizing they shape how you show up in the world. Not just in the bedroom, but in your relationships, your creativity, your conversations, and your capacity to feel joy. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with something you won't hear in most health videos: an honest, compassionate reminder about what this journey is really about and why cutting back isn't a loss, but a return to something far more meaningful. Let's talk about that now. Conclusion. After decades of listening to men in their 60s, 70s, even 80s share their stories, one truth has always stood out. When it comes to sexual health, clarity isn't just physical, it's emotional, it's psychological, and often it's spiritual. Masturbation isn't good or bad in itself, it's a mirror. It reflects how we cope, how we connect, and how we carry ourselves through the quiet, private parts of life that no one else sees. When you choose to reduce your frequency 10 times a month or less, you're not giving something up. You're creating space. Space for your dopamine system to reset so that excitement returns. Space for your energy to rebuild after years of overuse that may have led to sexual exhaustion or burnout. You're giving your brain the chance to focus more clearly, to respond with presence instead of reacting out of habit. You're also staying sexually engaged without letting desire become an autopilot pattern. You're keeping your prostate and pelvic system healthy while avoiding the crash that comes from overstimulation. And yes, for some of you, the right number might not be 10, it might be more or even less. That's why I've encouraged you to listen closely to your body and notice what changes when you do. But more than any number, what matters most is your intention. Are you seeking connection or escape? Are you present or distracted? The men I've seen make the greatest transformation don't necessarily masturbate less. They do it differently, slower, with purpose, with compassion for themselves instead of shame or urgency. And what happens? They feel more alive, more focused, more in control. Their relationships improve, their creativity returns, their inner world softens. And perhaps for the first time in years, they feel like they're leading their life, not being led by invisible impulses. I've seen this change over and over, in mechanics, teachers, veterans, widowers, in men who thought their best years were behind them. And yet with one small shift, a little less frequency and a lot more awareness, they discovered something powerful. Their strength wasn't gone. It was waiting, beneath the noise, beneath the habit, beneath the silence. So if you've ever wondered whether your habits are serving you or stealing from you, I encourage you to try it. Go a month, 10 or fewer times. Listen to what your body says. Let it speak. It might just tell you something you've been waiting to hear. If this video spoke to you, please take a moment to like, share it with a friend who might need it, and leave a comment below. I read every one. Your feedback helps me create more content that truly supports men like you. And if you'd like to support this work and help us reach more people, consider making a small donation. Every bit helps. Thank you for being here.